All right, welcome back, everyone. After a long, well, not so long hiatus, but after a little bit of a hiatus, welcome back to Worlds Beyond with Cam and Ron.
Hey guys, this is try number 2 for us. We went and recorded this episode and had some microphone recording quality issues, so we're back at it again, and hopefully we can make it even better this time around. So
We took a little bit of time off after the holidays. Cam, you were getting some work stuff squared away, and I was doing, I don't know what I was doing, but anyway, you got that stuff squared away. And so here we are back. We're excited about our season 2 of Worlds Beyond. And we're going to try to do things a little bit differently in some ways. And we're going to have some guests join us, just some folks join us to spice things up a little bit. So have that to look forward to. There's a lot of cool stuff coming out in terms of movies and TV shows, etc. So we're excited about that. And we are going to kick it off with a discussion of The Batman, directed by Cam?
Matt Reeves.
And you are a little bit more familiar with him than I am. I know he directed, the original Cloverfield?
Yes, yeah, we just figured that out. Initially, I thought he did Cloverfield Lane, 10 Cloverfield Lane, the sequel, but yes, he directed Cloverfield, and Drew Goddard wrote it.
And then he also did Let Me In, which was the American version of Let the Right One In.
Mm-hmm.
And I love that movie. So he's got some horror cred. He's got some sort of blockbuster cred.
Right. Yeah, he did the most recent Planet of the Apes movies as well.
Right. And neither of us have seen either of those, but they've gotten great reviews. And so here we are with Batman, a 3-hour tour. Not to bring Gilligan's Island into it, but it was definitely a 3-hour movie, but it did not feel like a 3-hour movie for the most part. What was your thoughts?
Yeah, the way this movie is kind of structured and paced is the biggest standout to me. It is 3 hours long, but it's almost segmented like a comic book miniseries, and the way that the story unfolds feels very much like a comic book as opposed to a movie plot. So I really appreciated that. And I won't get too much into spoilers yet, but the kind of climax and finale of the movie does something a little bit different than what we're used to with comic book movies. So overall, I loved it. It was a great take on Batman. I thought the cast was great, and that's kind of my overall thoughts. Do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, no, I was definitely a little skeptical going in. Because I didn't connect Matt Reeves, not Robert Pattinson, to the previous movies I'd seen of his, and definitely was a little bit skeptical of Robert Pattinson. Although, I mean, I think he's a fine actor. I'm obviously a bigger fan of Harry Potter than Twilight, but
right.
And I haven't seen any of his supposedly really great independent films.
Right? Yeah, no, he does seem to do a lot of those kind of more offbeat independent stuff after Twilight, and that's not really either of our styles, so I'm not super familiar with that. But I was definitely intrigued when they cast him, and thought maybe because he is used to doing those more kind of character independent focus kind of stuff. Maybe there was going to be something a little bit different about this take on Batman, and I'm glad that I was right.
Yeah, so overall I really enjoyed it. It did not feel like 3 hours. We'll talk about a little bit of what happened at the end. It was really great, and to me, one of the biggest things was that this is a Batman movie that is not an origin story. And you had a great comment about not seeing the pearls drop from Bruce Wayne's mom.
Right, yeah, no, I'm
on the
glad
floor,
we didn't
and
have to go through that whole sequence again, because we've seen it about 1,000 times before.
But it's early in Batman's career, and the thing that I like the most about it, not an original take, but a take that I heard that really resonated with me, was just how this really emphasizes Batman as the world's greatest detective, going back to the old Batman comics, and really gets into how he investigates crimes and looks into things, and I thought that was a really cool element. And I think you mentioned too the noir aspect of this film was really, really great.
Right, yeah. Well, I mean, even from the very kind of like first second of the movie where he's narrating and kind of journaling or narrating as he's journaling and kind of setting the scene, I think that was a very noir thing to do. And just obviously kind of the lighting and camera work and the way Gotham is portrayed. I think it's important before we go any further I don't think you can talk about this Batman film without comparing it to what's come before. And both of us have kind of maybe controversial take on the previous Nolan trilogy films. I personally enjoy all three of them. I think they're very good films for the most part, but as Batman films, especially the latter two, The Dark Knight and The Dark Knight Rises, both are almost like a slave to their realism and lose a lot of that comic book aspects that you kind of want. And he also just becomes, almost to your point, or exactly to your point, in those movies, he's not much of a detective. He's mostly just kind of a punchy gadget guy. So, yeah, I really liked how they leaned into the mystery element here. And even though it's kind of funny, too, because the Nolan movies are really long, and that's a complaint that both of us have about those. But this one feels a lot more focused and intriguing, I guess, than the Nolan films. Do you have anything to add?
Yeah, the Nolan films I enjoyed. I loved Batman Begins. I enjoyed the last one, although a lot of people think that one's kind of schlocky. The one that I really didn't care for was The Dark Knight. I thought that felt interminable to me, and I wasn't a huge fan of Heath Ledger's take on the Joker. Although the Riddler in this film has a very visceral feel to him,
right?
Similar to that, but I don't know. The Riddler in this movie just worked for me. The Joker in that movie didn't. And you hit it on the head too. That movie really goes out of its way, all outside of the crazy action scenes and certain obvious points. But that movie goes for some hyper realism, and this movie feels a little bit more comic book, and it harkens back to the Tim Burton Batman movies a little bit in terms of the way like Gotham looks and stuff like that. Whereas the Nolan films were more super realistic.
Right.
But yeah, I enjoy those films with the exception of The Dark Knight, which I know a lot of people really love that movie. But I think this tops those, and not just for Robert Pattinson's Batman voice being a little less over the top, although
right.
it's funny how people make fun of the Christian Bale Batman voice, but when the movies came out, everyone thought it was cool, but now it's almost become a caricature. But Robert Pattinson definitely kept that sort of pathos, but toned it down a little bit.
Right. Yeah. Well, even as the Nolan movies went on, I think that his voice got a little bit more like comical. I feel like in The Dark Knight it wasn't as bad as it got in in Batman Begins. It wasn't as bad as it got in The Dark Knight and The Dark Knight Rises. But yeah, no, Robert Pattinson does a great Batman, and he also does a great Bruce Wayne. It's definitely downplaying the kind of playboy millionaire aspect, and
he's almost kind of goth.
Yeah, goth, emo. Maybe not quite there, but there is that scene at the beginning when he's wearing the long black T-shirt and has these glasses on in the middle of the day, and I thought that was really funny. But to your point too about the Riddler, and it's comparing it to Heath Ledger's Joker. Heath Ledger's Joker was pretty much just a straight kind of insane psychopath terrorist guy. Whereas here, the Riddler is an insane psychopath terrorist guy, but he still retains a little bit of that camp and a little bit of his signature. Even though they went in a more almost Saw direction with it, he still asks his riddles and has puzzles to solve and that sort of thing. So I think that's what works a little bit better than, for me at least, than Heath Ledger's Joker. Even though I actually do like Heath Ledger's Joker well enough, but I can understand your point of view as well.
I think overall, let's talk a little bit about some of the other performances. I thought they were all great. I think Zoe Kravitz was great as Catwoman. I don't know how she made it through the whole movie without taking Batman's mask off.
Right, yeah.
But somehow she managed to do that. That stretched believability a little bit, but it worked. And Colin Farrell was unrecognizable as the Penguin.
Yeah, they did a great job.
And appearance. And I'm going to forget the actor's name who played Commissioner Gordon.
Oh, Jeffrey Wright.
Jeffrey Wright, yeah, he's phenomenal. I loved him in The Hunger Games.
He's been great in everything.
Yeah, and everything I've seen him in. But he's a perfect Commissioner Gordon. And the only portrayal I didn't love was John Turturro, and not that his performance was fine, and he's a great actor, obviously, but I didn't feel him as much as Falcone. I was a fan of the Gotham TV series on Fox, and they had, and I don't remember, I have no idea who the actor was that played him, but he just felt like a much more like just tough, scary gangster kind of guy,
right?
That just was very sort of imposing and threatening, and Turturro just didn't give me that same feeling. I didn't feel. I felt like Catwoman should have just completely like kicked his ass whenever whenever they, got near each other. But
right.
So that was one performance, and again, it wasn't his performance. It was just the casting, maybe. But yeah, everyone did a tremendous job.
Yeah, I think I kind of liked the direction they went with Falcone or Falcone, however you decide to pronounce it. I think they go back and forth depending on the Batman media. But I think he provided a little bit of a balance to Penguin, who was more of a traditional, imposing mobster villain. And I like a lot of this movie is kind of doing things differently, so I kind of felt like that was another intentional choice to make him more of a muted, like kind of laid back character as opposed to a more traditional mobster. And I guess since it's been released, since we last attempted to record this, they did put out a deleted scene of the Joker, or at least in a he was in the film.
I haven't seen it.
And yeah, I actually thought this deleted scene was a lot better than what they included in the film, because in the film it felt
just the disembodied voices, yeah.
Right. Well, yeah, that felt like for everything that this movie did differently, and we'll get into spoilers in just a second, but for everything that this movie did differently, I thought that felt very much like a typical superhero tease for the sequel, and it's almost like they couldn't help themselves but put the Joker in. It feels like you have to put the Joker in, but that kind of felt like it was against the kind of recurring theme of breaking the mold of Batman films. But overall, I think I'm looking forward to where they take it. And the deleted scene that they released, I think I almost wonder if they wanted to retract a little bit, because they show the Joker a lot more in this deleted scene, so I almost wonder if they want to tweak the design a little bit, so they decided to take that out, and because it's very similar to Heath Ledger's Joker as it is now, and I almost wonder and hope that they maybe redesign him a little bit and make him a little bit more traditional, but I guess we'll see where they go with that.
Cool, yeah. In terms of getting into revealing some stuff about what happens in the movie, what are your thoughts that you want to get into there?
Oh, right, yeah. Well, spoiler alert, obviously, but I guess the biggest standout thing about the plot to me was the climax of the movie being more of a character beat for Batman as opposed to a big explosive action scene. There's plenty of explosive action scenes, obviously, but what I liked about this is that the big villain, the Riddler, is captured and kind of taken off the playing field for the last act of the movie, which allows for the climax to be the moment where Batman realizes that he's had the wrong effect on the city and that he created the Riddler. And then once he realizes that the very peak of that scene is him going down and deciding to help the citizens of Gotham and leading them to safety. And I thought that was a really kind of inspired choice to go with, as opposed to where most of these superhero films that we see, that it's the big, huge action scene and then they deliver the final blow. So I thought that was really cool.
No, yeah, that was definitely a little bit different. That sort of introspection and that sort of like just that reveal that Batman maybe isn't what he hoped it would be.
Right. Well, yeah, I feel like that's the first time that theme has been really explored in a Batman movie, at least. Him kind of having the wrong effect and almost being the creator of these villains. So I think that was really cool. Kind of an interesting take that we haven't seen on film before. Yeah,
and let's talk about the ending a little bit. So this definitely didn't feel like a 3-hour movie. So if you haven't seen it yet, I know we're getting to this a little bit late. So most folks have probably seen the Batman already, but definitely encourage seeing it. Definitely hit the restroom before the film starts, because it is a 3-hour film. But it didn't feel like it. Although at the end, the only point at which it did feel like it had some length to it was towards the end, because there's sort of multiple wrap-up scenes and sort of wrap-ups to the wrap-ups, and we jokingly compared it to Return of the King in the Lord of the Rings trilogy, how that movie ends and then it ends and then it ends again.
Yeah, there's like 10 different endings.
Yeah, and then Bilbo going to going out to the sea to leave, and there's several wrap-ups to that film. So this film did have several sort of wrap-up scenes of different elements of the story that but it all worked. It all worked fine. But it was kind of funny. It was like, oh, I thought it was about to end, and then
right, yeah. I think I thought it was about to end about 45 minutes before it actually did.
But that's not a bad thing necessarily.
Right. Yeah, I mean, yeah. It compared to the Nolan films, this one felt a lot more focused. It's longer than the Nolan films, but those ones feel super long and kind of have these detours that feel unnecessary at points, at least in my opinion.
My last couple thoughts, I think one point of sort of like the hyper-realism of the Nolan films versus this one is more comic book, but in a nod to realism, one of the things I noticed was that you really felt the sense of Batman being this, okay, this guy just walked into this room wearing a bat helmet with little bat ears coming out, and he's got this body armor on, and like the way the police reacted to it, the way the bouncers reacted to it when he went to that club, when he went to the Penguins Club, it really kind of like shined a light on like, okay, here's this guy in this ridiculous costume, and are we supposed to take him seriously? So they did a nice job with that. The one thing that for me felt a little strange was the Batmobile scene, the big sort of Batmobile scene. So when the Batmobile scene happens, the Batmobile is tremendous. By the way,
that scene is awesome.
But when they introduce it, Batman gets shot and kind of gets knocked out, and Catwoman and Commissioner Gordon kind of like take on the fire and sort of deflect things from him. But then now they're under fire, and then all of a sudden they cut to way down this alley. The Batmobile gets fired up and starts charging, and the Penguin gets scared, and the Batmobile is just revving its engine, and then just sort of starts taking off down the alley, and the Penguin I didn't feel like he had any reason to, but he just jumps in his car and drives away and leaves all his henchmen and Commissioner Gordon and Catwoman there, and then we proceed to have this phenomenal chase with the Batmobile. So all in all, it was a very satisfying, great scene, but it just seemed kind of like, it almost felt to me a little bit like they were just sort of shoehorning the Batmobile into it. But anyway, that was just one scene that struck me as a little funny, although it's a cool, great action scene.
Yeah, it seems more like a forced reveal scene than anything else. It stretched believability a little bit, but overall it was really cool.
One thing we shouldn't forget too is, and it's almost because he wasn't in the film, I think, enough, is Andy Serkis.
Yeah, he was great. as Alfred.
Alfred, yeah, he was awesome, and he's such a perfect choice for Alfred. And there's some great poignant moments between him and Bruce. And I almost could have used more Alfred, more Andy Serkis.
Yeah, I'm glad they didn't end up killing him in that scene. I thought they might, because they were doing so many kind of unique, different things with this version of Batman. I thought maybe that might be something that they did, but I'm glad they didn't, because I think it would have been too early. I'd like to see them interact a little bit more.
All right, any final thoughts?
Nope, I think we covered everything I wanted to cover.
Awesome. All right, well, that's a wrap on the Batman. All right, we are back and
moving on to Peacemaker.
Yes. So we just want to cover, we took some time off, so we want to cover some of the shows and movies that have come out in the sort of little hiatus period that we were out. And definitely one big one was Peacemaker. So Cam, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think, like we were saying, we were both a little bit skeptical going into Peacemaker because his character was he really was one of the antagonists in the Suicide Squad and ended up killing one of the more likable characters in that movie. So I think all the episodes had come out by the time we had started watching it, but finally I just bit the bullet and started watching it, and within 30 minutes I texted you and Dad and said, yeah, no, I love it. Like I totally had a 360 on his character. Like, it provided context, and throughout the entire course of the series, they really do a great job humanizing him and delving into the kind of context behind his actions in Suicide Squad and his personality. So, and I think the biggest surprise for me was just how strong of an actor John Cena is in this. And I was saying to you too how I don't think The Rock could get anywhere near this level of acting skill that John Cena showed here. He did a great job.
Yeah, I was very surprised. And again, so James Gunn's Suicide Squad, the new Suicide Squad, came out last summer. I was skeptical of that and ended up loving it. But John Cena's character plays just a really just kind of despicable guy and kills one of the very sympathetic characters in Suicide Squad. So when they came up with this idea that James Gunn's doing this Peacemaker show on HBO, I'm like, that guy's such a jerk. Like, I don't want to watch that show. And I didn't for a while, but even despite the great things that people were saying about it, but then finally watched it, and it's very James Gunn, so it's very violent and like offbeat and off color and black humor and all sorts of stuff like that. But it's great too. And just to round out on your point, I haven't been a fan of John Cena as an actor. I think he's fine in like the sort of action obvious roles that he gets put into, but he really humanized this character. And humanize, again, a sort of despicable, kind of misogynistic character, I guess you would say. But he did a really great job. The
other standout character of this film or of this series for me was Vigilante. I thought everything he said was hilarious, and I loved how he interacted and kind of just he wasn't even an official part of that whole kind of task force there. They just kind of picked him up, which I thought was hilarious.
Yeah, I didn't know what to make of his character, and I was kind of annoyed by him. And that I think that was intentional. That's what they were going for. He was sort of this kind of annoying, weird tag-alongs, like vigilante wannabe, superhero wannabe kind of guy. But then he just like a nagging bug or whatever you want to call it. He just hung around, and he just kind of becomes sort of great by the end of the show.
Yeah, I couldn't tell at the beginning of the show. I wasn't sure if they were going to kind of make him more of an antagonistic character or a protagonistic character, but I'm glad that they they ended up kind of going with a more positive direction with him because he ended up being hilarious.
And one of the things that I liked about the show too was, while in some ways I do feel like it did kind of throw everything but the kitchen sink into it, and James Gunn likes to do a lot of sort of like getting into these like verbal like sparring contests between the characters that like just get totally off like outside of the plot and whatever, and sometimes they work and sometimes it's like, okay, can we get on with it? So there is that everything but the kitchen sink feel to it, and there's a lot of twists, like in terms of, you know, who the villains are and who's the good guys and who's the bad guys, and that all was really great. But I mean, I know you were telling me something about just how this sort of fits into the theme of the way he does a lot of his films.
Well, yeah, well, it's funny. I noticed I was really much more invested in the plot with Peacemaker and his father, who's one of the most easily hateable villains that we've seen in a superhero show. And I thought Robert Patrick did a great job portraying this just awful character. But the kind of, I don't want to say B plot, because it really, I guess maybe that was the B plot, and the kind of big world-ending superhero threat plot was a very traditional James Gunn parasitic alien takes over a small town. He's done like 3 different movies, I think, where that has happened. Slither, Suicide Squad, actually, if you think about it.
Yeah.
And even Guardians of the Galaxy 2, to a certain extent, has that kind of, not really parasitic alien element, but it does have that kind of expansion when Ego is doing his expansion through the universe or whatever, has that a similar vibe to that. So I thought that was kind of in line with James Gunn's previous. He loves that particular theme.
Yeah, and all the performances were really good. I love how the sort of this like very unlikely team comes together of sort of misfits. It has a lot of that vibe to it, which worked really well. And then, you know, we can't leave Peacemaker, of course, without talking about all the hair metal.
Right. Oh, yeah. Well, that was the other selling point that I told you guys about. I was like, the music is all this kind of, a lot of hair metal that I'm familiar with, and a lot of stuff that I'm sure you are, but was more obscure to me. And then they even had a European power metal song as the end credits, which was great in one of the episodes.
Yeah, they really dug into the deep catalog. There, one band that came up a couple times was Choir Boys, and like I vaguely remember that band, but he really digs deep into the catalog of like obscure hair metal bands. And even the theme song, "Do You Want to Taste It," is ironically a new Scandinavian band that just does. That's their style. They do like throwback glam rock and 80s hair metal, and it's a great song.
Yeah, that whole intro sequence is awesome and kind of irreverent, because it has nothing to do really with the or at all to do anything to do with the main plot of the show.
Yeah. So Peacemaker, thought I was going to hate it, ended up really liking it. Any final thoughts from you?
No, 2 thumbs up from me. I loved it.
The other sort of major, well, at least in our minds anyway, sort of horror sci-fi genre film that came out during our hiatus was Scream. Actually Scream 5, but titled Scream. And what did you think, Cam?
Yeah, I wasn't super thrilled with it. I think I was really excited leading up to it. Dad and I watched all the Scream movies, and I was hearing some positive buzz about it, so I was expecting to go into it and really like it, but I felt that it kind of stripped away a lot of the stuff I liked about Scream and brought in some new elements that I wasn't a huge fan of. I think there was increased focus on kind of weight to everything, like when all the characters were revealed, it was kind of like this big reveal moment, when comparatively in Scream 4, which was kind of the last time they tried to revive the Scream franchise, all of those characters are introduced very naturally, and there isn't kind of sort of this weight brought on to everything. And I just kind of think that they stripped away some of the more comedic elements, and the meta elements were more just relegated to dialogue and not tied into the plot. So I just felt that it didn't really do anything that Scream 4 didn't do better.
Right. I totally agree. This is an eminently watchable, it's fine. It's an enjoyable, sort of, crazy light comedy horror slasher film. And if you like the other Screams, you can watch this movie and enjoy it. The cast is great, particularly Jenna Ortega. She's becoming kind of a younger Scream queen. She's one of those actors that started out in Disney, and now she's been in a bunch of horror stuff on Netflix and in films. She's great. But yeah, I just felt like I really liked Scream 4, and I felt like Scream 4 was that, okay, it's been a long time, we're going to reboot this with a younger cast and a kind of post-millennial feel, and lean into the whole people just wanting to make a name for themselves, or people just wanting to being so caught up in the movie and in their fictional world, the stab movies. And I just felt like this movie kind of sort of did the same thing over again, and just kind of leaned into it harder, but didn't do it as well. There were things that, one of the things that struck me was, people die, and kids and classmates died in the original Scream, and then they went and had a house party at this kid's house, and that was sort of a statement about just how, kids don't feel anymore and whatever else. And they really did that in this film. One of their best friends and his mother, who was the sheriff, get wiped out, and they are 2 hours later having a party, and they toast him, and then he's completely forgotten about. And it just, there was just a lot of things that seemed crazy. I did, Courtney Cox and Nev Campbell and God, I always forget his name. Dewey.
David Arquette.
David Arquette. And they were all good. Some of their lines were a little too on point, and we've been through this so many times, and so it doesn't really affect us, that sort of thing. But so yeah, I felt like this was watchable. I didn't feel like I wasted an hour and a half watching this movie, but it just felt like it was okay. Scream 4, I thought, did it better.
Yeah, I think the thing that a lot of people latched on to this movie for is the kind of toxic fandom commentary angle. And this had a pretty overt reference to the Star Wars The Last Jedi controversy, and how some people were upset about that, and the killers in this movie were mad that the Knives Out, quote unquote, the Knives Out guy ruined Stab with Stab 8. But I just felt that, and I was someone that really was not happy with The Last Jedi, and I've since, kind of...
But you weren't toxic about it.
Right, exactly. And I think that toxic fandom is kind of a major issue, so a lot of people were kind of latching on to that in this movie, but I don't think it really had anything interesting to say about it. No. Other than just kind of bringing it up,
Right, it was almost kind of like we're gonna call this out in this film, but
not really have anything interesting to say about it. So yeah, not super impressed. I think Scream 1 through 4 are going to be fine for me, and they're already talking about Scream 6, and that to me it's just like, what more can you do? It seems like there hasn't been enough in terms of horror trends and that sort of thing to really justify another one. So it's kind of like, okay, enough is enough.
Yeah, I mean, the whole setup of how they do the opens of every Scream movie, etc. It's like, it's great and we all enjoy it, but how many times can you do it?
Right. Well, yeah, I mean, that is kind of a horror movie tradition, but especially now that Wes Craven is gone, I think it's time to throw in the towel.
Yep. All right. A few other just notable items, I guess, or one Netflix show that you and I stumbled upon that we both really liked was Archive 81.
Yeah, I saw this and immediately I was hooked because I love anything with mysterious evil entities and people going through files or appropriately archives. And this movie really channels that kind of found footage element, even though it is a traditional horror series. I really loved kind of the occult, almost Lovecraft aspect of it.
Yeah, I think just that whole idea of like just stumbling upon some found footage, and it leads to checking out this apartment building, and it leads to maybe there's this cult, and maybe there's this connection between past and present, and a lot of Lovecraftian themes get brought up, but with a new twist, a great cast, and unfortunately, the series, I think, has already been canceled.
Yeah, they just canceled it.
Yeah, I liked it. There were points towards the last few episodes where I think it got a little over the top, and to me, this totally could have been a limited series and just ended. And they could have sort of, whatever, saved each other, saved the day. I won't get too far into it. I definitely feel folks should watch it. I thought it was really good. Some people felt it was slow at points. And it's just, if you're into that kind of found footage, just sort of the pieces slowly unfold of this mystery with this kind of crazy, just sort of arcane background to these people's lives and this footage. If you like that sort of thing, you'll enjoy it. If not, you might feel like it's kind of slow. I almost felt like the hook to a season 2 was sort of thrown in at the end. But really enjoyed it. I think folks should check that out. And
yeah, I'm bummed it got canceled, but it does have a fairly solid wrap-up. There is a little bit of a thread lingering, and I do wish they were able to tie that up. But I do agree. I think it probably would have been better if they hadn't added that. But I think there's enough of a satisfying ending to kind of be able to recommend it on its own. Although I will definitely miss the opportunity for a second season.
And then just lastly, a couple of shows like on Apple TV. I enjoyed the Foundation series, which is based on the Isaac Asimov novel series from like a million years ago, back in the 50s. I thought that was fairly well done. Not great, but good. It kept me interested. And then that leads us to the final thing that we want to just touch on briefly tonight, which is Halo. I just watched the first episode.
I haven't seen it yet. Because especially as someone who isn't familiar with the games, I'm interested in what you have to say about the first episode.
Yeah, I know nothing. I don't game at all, and I only know Halo from the TV commercials advertising the games. I went into this very skeptically. I'm like, oh my god, this is going to be another game adaptation, and I thought it was good. I thought it was. I thought they came up with a good angle, and I have no idea how it relates to the story in the game or whatever. But they came up with a thread with the Master Chief, who's the lead Halo character, warrior guy, and they go to this planet, and they're kind of like the enemy, but they're not the enemy, and then they save this girl and find this alien artifact. So like it feels to me, having with no experience in the show, in the game, that I definitely want to see what happens next. So I guess that's the biggest thing you can say about the success of a show. And then just in terms of the production, yeah, it's a TV show. Yeah, I wasn't disappointed in the production value, or I thought the special effects were fine. It's definitely a TV show. They're not. This isn't a game. This isn't Game of Thrones level production value for a TV show, and it's certainly not a movie. But I wasn't like, oh my god, this is awful. So my overall impression is, as someone who doesn't know the IP at all, I want to at least see what happens next. Maybe I'll be interested, maybe I won't.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I'm actually not a huge Halo fan. I really like the games, but I'm not like a diehard. The changes to the material, I have a less of a problem with than, like you brought up the production value. To me, just based on the trailers, I'm not super impressed with it. Like I was mentioning to you guys the other day, I think it looks kind of like a bad network show, or even like a fan film. It just, especially compared to, I mean, obviously, I don't think this show has a huge budget, but compared to even some of the most recent science fiction shows that we've seen recently, it just seems a little bit shoddy, and to the point where, when I'm looking at the aliens in the show, or at least in the trailer, it looks just as good as the games currently do. So I'm kind of like, what if there's no kind of interactive element? Then I feel like there's no point to this. But I have heard that there is some promise to the show. Obviously, diehards are pissed off about changes to the source material, but that's always going to be the case. Depending on what you guys think, I might end up watching it, but I think I'm going to wait and see on that one.
Yeah, I'll watch the next episode. But like I said, it was good. It was fine.
Yeah, I'll be interested in seeing where it goes. I think it's probably a bit too early to tell.
All right, so we'll end it. I think we're getting close to the 45-minute mark, so we'll cut it off here. Mm-hmm. We are really, really excited about this season after our recharge. And there's so much stuff coming out. There is Doctor Strange and a bunch of Marvel Disney Plus shows.
Moon Knight.
Things. Moon Knight, obviously. Moon Knight will be our next episode. We're going to watch, just like we did with Hawkeye, we're going to watch the first 3 episodes of Moon Knight, mm-hmm. and then give you that sort of first half reaction, and then move on to the second half, and we'll weave in some other items as well. We'll probably have a guest too. I think we're going to have a guest for our next episode. And but there's so much stuff coming out. Stranger Things, I think I said. Thor: Love and Thunder. Tons of Marvel stuff coming out. Nope, that new movie by Jordan Peele looks wacky with like sort of this weird horror, but alien abduction. God, I don't even know what's going on.
I know, yeah, I'm looking forward to that.
Looks great. So yeah, we're excited. We hope you are excited to be back. We're excited to be back speaking to you guys about all this stuff. And thanks for listening, and we'll see you soon.
See you on the next one, guys.